All right. So last time we had class, we started talking about the requirements of a contract. Who remembers the requirements of a contract? Gio, what did you say? Agreement. Okay, so agreement's a big part of it. That's what we're going to focus on today, is the agreement part of a contract, which has an offer and then an acceptance. So we'll look at both of those parts. Someone offers someone something, someone accepts something, and then there's this meeting of the minds about what's being exchanged. What else is required to form a contract?
Consideration.
Good, Dalia. So consideration we'll look at next class. And what is consideration again? It's really something that has to be exchanged of value. So generally in business, what is that? Money for
Labor, service.
labor or services or products. Okay, so we'll look at that as well. Next week we'll also address another requirement. We talked about this last class, the idea of legality. It has to be a legal contract. Okay, so if it's about something that eventually turns illegal or is illegal from the start, the court doesn't want to help enforce that. And again, as a reminder, capacity. The people involved have to be able to understand what the contract is about and in order to have this agreement, this meeting of the minds. So capacity is things like what? What could affect your capacity to contract? Your age. So in the law, they say if you're a child, which is under 18, you might not have the ability to understand the contract you're agreeing to. So not all agreements with children or people under 18 in the law may be enforceable. What else could be a capacity issue?
Mentally ill.
A mental illness, not being able to understand the consequences, or if you've somehow harmed your ability to think straight by doing something like drinking too much alcohol or using drugs, being under the influence of those could be a capacity issue. So that's what we need to form a contract. Now remember, all semester I kept saying the law is not fair, the law is not fair. But under contracts, things are pretty fair and reasonable. So even if there's not a contract, we talked about a couple options to help enforce the agreement. Who remembers those options? Go ahead, Dalia.
The promissory estoppel.
So option number 1, promissory estoppel. So if you remember, we talked about this like cheating husband. Okay, other options: 1, promissory estoppel. That says if someone makes a promise you are likely to rely on, you relied on it, and the only way to avoid injustice is to enforce it. The law will still enforce it even if there's not a contract. And then the second option was what? Quasi-contract. Yeah, so if they, do something like build you a really cool, deck in your backyard, and then they add some extra, really cool lighting to that deck, making sure you're paying for the lighting. Otherwise, you'd be what we call unjustly enriched. You'd be getting something of value without paying for it. So the fair thing to do is make sure that even if there's not a contract, that person gets paid. So we talked about all this last time we met. Just that was a quick reminder for you. And we did a lot of activity looking at promises we've made. Things like cleaning up the house. When we break those promises, legally, is there anything that's going to happen in court because I don't clean the house when I promised to?
No.
No, because what am I lacking in terms of the contract requirements?
Legal.
Well, cleaning's legal. Which part seems to be at issue? With all the general promises we break throughout our lives. Go ahead, Jonah.
Consideration.
Yeah, consideration. There's nothing of value being exchanged. If I just say, hey, I'm going to clean my house to my husband, and then I don't, it's like he was paying me $100 to go clean my house. So that's where you run into issues with daily promises. Contracts are promises that meet all those elements, so the law will in fact enforce them. So we talked about those couple options, promissory estoppel. We talked about quasi-contract. I want to show you an example now of an agreement between two parties. This is Big Bang Theory again. So if you're not familiar, you'll see a quick clip here regarding a roommate agreement that they have.
I'd like to begin the meeting by congratulating you on the progress in your relationship with Dr. Stephanie. Thank you. And that being said, we have to discuss the implementation of the agreed-upon cohabitation rider, which has been activated now that the two of you are living together.
We're not living together.
I beg to disagree. Shall be deemed, quote, living with, unquote, Leonard when she has stayed over for A, 10 consecutive nights, or B, more than 9 nights in a 3-week period, or C, all the weekends of a given month plus 3 weeknights. That's absurd. You initialed it, see? LH, LH, LH.
Okay, no, wait, I only initialed it because I never thought it would happen. I initialed another clause naming you my sidekick in case I get superpowers.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, she seems very nice.
Oh, she is. She's terrific. Yeah, and she's proving to be a valuable roommate.
Roommate? You guys are living together?
Like hippies.
We're not living together.
Do I have to pull out the paperwork again?
We're not living together.
Are you sure?
How could I not be sure?
Well, let's find out.
Don't you think if a woman was living with me, I'd be the first one to know about it?
Sweetie, you'd be the last one to know about it. Cute dresses. I bet this looks great on you.
We're not living together.
Okay. Scented candles, fuzzy slippers. Ooh, floral bed sheets.
We're not living together.
Okay, moving on. Who are these guys at Disney World?
The big dog is Goofy. And the older couple with the mouse ears, I have no idea. We're not living together.
You're gonna go down swinging, huh? All right, well, we got your body lotion, your In Style magazine, your jewelry box.
We're not. Where's my bat signal?
You have a bat signal?
I did. It was right here. She must have. Oh my God, we're living together.
So I show you that clip because I want to talk about a couple other key takeaways for contract agreements, okay? In that clip we saw they were talking about an agreement they had within their contract, which was living together. What does it mean to live with someone? What are some indicators that you're living with someone?
You have your stuff at their house.
Good, Henry, yeah, like do you have some of your stuff at their house? So we saw in the clip, was there stuff?
Yeah,
Like what kind of stuff showed that maybe they were living together?
or clothes.
So some of her clothes were there, pictures of her own family, not his. Saw some fluffy pillows, right? His bat signal was missing. Okay, so we see some things there that show they're living together. Just because you have clothes at someone's house, does it mean you live together? Not necessarily. Okay, what other things could indicate that you're living together? If you're paying rent, that definitely could be an indication, right? What else could indicate that you're living together?
Stay there all weekends.
So if they're staying there frequently, so living together is a pretty unclear kind of thing here, and this actually happens a lot. So you'll have a roommate, you're living in an apartment, your roommate gets a boyfriend, they get a girlfriend, and they start being there quite a bit, eating your food, and being under the house that you're paying for, right? And so this is an issue that's very common. Sheldon solved this issue by being very specific about what he felt living together was. So it wasn't just like, hey, they sleep here sometimes. He's saying 10 consecutive nights in a row. That means that you are living together, you're cohabitating. So when you write a contract, you want to make sure you're very, very specific. We'll talk today about this idea of being definite. And to make sure you have this meaning of the mind and you understand what you're agreeing to, you can't really say things like, oh, if you're living together, well then we need to charge more money. Because people can have a different perception of what living together really means. So you want to be more specific about what actually gives rise to living together. Do contracts have to be in writing?
No.
No. In this instance, was it helpful that it was?
Yeah.
Why was it helpful that it was in writing, even though it didn't have to be? Go ahead, Henry.
Because he didn't think it was actually going to happen.
Yeah, he's like, I didn't think he was gonna get a girlfriend. So he just signed and was like, okay, so he showed them that he was agreeing to the circumstances that Sheldon put forth. Okay, Sheldon had an offer, he agreed to it, and because he had it in writing, he was able to remind him of it. Hey, this is your signature on this, right? He also agreed if he got superpowers, right, that he was gonna do something, but so was it an issue of Leonard not understanding what he was agreeing to?
No.
No, he just was kind of signed, wasn't really thinking about it. So it doesn't always have to be in writing, but it's a good idea that it is. Okay, often what happens with a contract, everything's fine and great when you write the contract. It's when the issues arise years, months later, when people don't really quite remember everything, that's when you're happy it's in writing. So for example, my sister and I have mentioned that she runs a business out of the bottom level of my home, so she pays me rent for that business. We made the agreement, we put it in writing. Even though she's my sister and I love her, I'm very forgetful. I know that about myself. She is too. It's also a good idea to have it in writing for other purposes. For example, if I ever wanted to go get another house, it'd be good to show the income coming in from that business in my current house. And to do that, I need to show an actual lease for it, right? And so I forgot, like 6 months into it, we had a special thing set up because it's a business where she was paying like a flat rate and then more for the amount of customers and clients she had using the space so that she wouldn't like lose money because she's my sister and I didn't want her losing money. But I couldn't remember what we agreed to because she didn't start like having more people until 6 months later, and neither could she. So being able to have that as a reference point, it helps make sure everything's fair too. So it's a good idea to write things down. So we talked about quasi-contract last class. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the terms you'll hear used throughout our contract sessions. So in terms of what you could see on an exam, this is going to be some of the most helpful stuff we cover. This is terminology I want you to be familiar with in terms of contracts to make sure that you don't run into issues around these things. So the first is bilateral versus unilateral contracts. Now, bilateral contract means both parties make a promise, and we know who both those parties are. Most contracts, for that reason, are bilateral, because usually it's two people or more agreeing to do something, right? So in the example I gave you with me and my sister, I'm one of the parties, my sister's the other party. We know who both of them are, right? Can anyone else give an example of a contract? We talked about a few last class. Go ahead, Riley.
Lease.
A lease agreement, right? So Riley, you have a lease, right? So Riley and his roommate, they're one of the parties on the lease, and then who's the other party? You don't have to say his name.
How about you mean my roommate?
The apartment owner? The landlord. Yeah, we don't have to say his name, right? So there's the landlord, and then we have Riley and his roommate. Those are the parties, and we know all of them involved. So is that unilateral or bilateral? Bilateral. Unilateral really only applies in very rare situations. I'll explain kind of the key example of it. The idea behind unilateral is you're making a promise, and in exchange you're asking anyone, you don't know who it is, but anyone, to do something really specific. And whoever it is that does that really specific thing, that person will then be a party under the contract. But we don't know initially who that's going to be. Okay, the fact that we ask them to do some really specific action and they do those specific actions makes them the other party. So for an example, unilateral, anyone have a dog in here? So many dog lovers. I had like half my last class too. So if you don't mind, Deborah, what's your dog's name? Princess, that's adorable. So it sounds like Princess is probably pretty cute, right? You'd be upset if she went missing? Oh no, she goes missing and Deborah's really, really upset. I'm sorry. And so Deborah's really, really upset and she's looking for Princess. So she goes around and she posts reward signs. $1,000 reward if you find Princess and bring her to me at my house in Silver Spring. Deborah posts those signs. So who's one of the parties involved in that contract? Deborah. Who's the other party? Anyone, right? So who finds Deborah's dog Princess? Do we have any heroes in the room today? Riley, that's so nice of you. Riley finds Princess. Come on, guys. You can find her, right? So Riley goes out. He finds Princess for Deborah. He brings it to her door, brings Princess to her door. Deborah gives him the $1,000. He happens to be that party because he followed those specific actions, right? He was the one that showed up. It could have been Maddie. It could have been Sinya, but Riley showed up. Okay, so it's not that we know both of the parties involved, but as long as you do the specific things that are asked, it's still a contract. That's what we call a unilateral contract. Where this comes into play in a business setting, a lot of businesses will give you like a warranty. You know, they'll say, use our product for 30 days, it'll be free or discounted for that amount of time. Okay, it could be any customer that applies to. That doesn't mean we say, hey, it's not a contract, there's no meeting of the minds, we don't know who's involved here. It's anyone who follows the actions they're requesting. We don't want to have businesses not enforcing those promises they're making just because we don't know both parties. So bilateral versus unilateral, that is something you might see on the exam, so you want to be familiar with the difference. Now, if you're not sure, which it is when you're looking at an agreement, what would be a good guess? Bilateral versus unilateral.
Right.
Bilateral, why, Sinya? Because most contracts are bilateral. Yeah, so that could be a good one on the exam for a guess. Now, the other terminology when we talk about contracts are express versus implied contracts. What this has to do with is having a contract that's a little more formal, expressly stated in writing, versus an implied contract. Now, I ask you to do something, you do it, it kind of seems like from your actions we have an agreement. So, for example, I hire a cleaning service. I say, you come clean my house, I'll leave you some cash, $100 out on the counter, and that's something you do bi-weekly. We don't have anything in writing, it's not so formal, but if she goes and cleans up the house, that implies that she's willing to do that work. So just really express, is it stated clearly, is it more formal versus implied? Do the actions kind of seem to show that you indicated to have an agreement? So here we can see that can be done through a handshake. So in our Big Bang Theory video that we just watched, did they have an express contract or an implied contract? Why is it express? You're correct. Why is it express? Good job, Jeffrey. It's in writing, right?
Yeah.
And they showed agreement to it by having a signature, which he pointed out in the video clip.
So express has to be in writing or?
Doesn't necessarily have to be in writing, but usually it's going to be because you're really explicitly stating all of the important terms of the agreement. That would take a long time to do verbally. Okay, but you could. If I'm expressly saying, Sinya, come to my house, I'll pay you $100 if you want to clean the kitchen, and you say, okay, I'm going to do that. Express, we haven't really talked through all of the terms. For example, are you going to bring the cleaning supplies? So usually it's going to be more in writing. Executory versus executed, this is easy. What does executory mean? Sounds fancy, but if you look on the screen, what does it really mean?
When somebody doesn't fulfill their end of the bargain.
Not that they haven't fulfilled it, it's just not yet, right? So, Jonah, how would you describe this? I saw your hand was up.
No, I was just gonna say, when one or both of the parties haven't completed their part.
Yeah, it's not done yet, right? So, it's in progress. Kind of for a simple way to say it, it's in progress, right? It's not that they're going to bail on the contract or anything like that, but they haven't fulfilled their duties yet. So executory means in progress. Whereas executed, it's complete. They've both fulfilled their obligations. For example, you go to buy a home, you get the funding to purchase the home, and then you start living in it. You've completed the contract at that point. It's executed. Now you'll see these words come up a little bit when we get towards legality and capacity, the idea of a valid contract. A valid contract satisfies the requirements we talked about earlier. An agreement, consideration, that it's legal, and that there's capacity involved. That's a valid contract. It can be unenforceable, meaning that the law will not help you with that promise that was being made if it doesn't meet all the requirements under the law we discussed. Again, if it's missing that agreement, consideration, legality, or capacity. The other terminology, the last piece to be familiar with as we go through the contract stuff is voidable versus void. Voidable contract, does that mean that it's not going to work out? That contract totally is just non-existent, didn't work? What does voidable mean?
You can terminate the agreement.
You can terminate it. Good, Sanya. You can. It doesn't mean it's automatically terminated. So voidable means there's an option for either one or both parties to end the contract. So we'll see this come up, for example, when we talk about capacity. Often when you sign an agreement or you make an agreement with someone under age 18, it gives that person under age 18, the option to cancel the contract. It's voidable. Just because they're under 18 doesn't make it void. It doesn't mean it's automatically terminated. It just gives them an option to do so. A void contract is something like an illegal contract. Okay, we're just not going to enforce that. It was void when it started. It's not going to work. There's a few other areas of contracts that you want to be familiar with because what's going to happen is we're going to talk about different types of businesses. Different types of businesses have to follow different laws here. Different types of subject matter follow different rules when we talk about contracts. So I will specify for you when there's an exception to some of these rules and when it applies. So the sources of contract law vary depending on what you're agreeing to. Most contracts are what we call common law. Okay, Okay, common law, or that idea of precedent. What does it mean again? We've heard it so many times this semester. What's precedent? Someone who hasn't had a chance to talk today. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Previous laws?
Yeah, previous cases. Okay, that set a standard. That's the idea of common law for contracts. This applies to everything except for the sale of goods. So products being sold in a store. If it's products being sold in a store, the Uniform Commercial Code, Article 2, will apply. That's known as the UCC. So throughout our conversation today and the rest of the semester, you will see contracts are handled differently depending on whether it's a service or a product we're talking about in the contract. Okay, so you will see some differences. I'll point them out to you. The Uniform Commercial Code can be more flexible about things, whereas if it's a service, common law applies. You might see it's a little more strict. The last source of contract law is known as the restatement of contracts. This exists for torts and some other areas of the law as well. Because so much of contracts, if it's not a product being sold, fall prior cases, it can be a little inconsistent, especially from state to state. Do most businesses just stick to one state when they're selling things? Like a service or when you have an agreement? Is it always in one state? No, especially not in this area, right? So that's where we don't want to have inconsistencies state to state. It can cause some issues. So here under the restatement, this is a non-binding authority, meaning it's not like this is the law, you have to follow it. It's more of a suggestion. It's a good idea to follow it. So they've had a bunch of judges come together, attorneys come together and say, you know, looking at some of these prior cases, here's what's reasonable, what the law should be. And states choose to either adopt parts of this or adopt it in full. Now here's the issue that comes up. Black Friday's coming up, right? Awesome deals. Anyone buying anything fun? Who's buying something fun for Black Friday? Come on, share. Javon, what are you getting? That's awesome, a big TV. See, that's a great deal for Black Friday. Anyone else getting anything? Seriously, this is our only shopper for Black Friday. It's okay, it's online too now in most places, so you can still be comfy at home and buy things. No one else is buying anything.
Monday.
What do you say, honey?
It's on Monday.
No, it's like
Cyber Monday's big, but yeah, some of them are even starting earlier. So, Javon, I'm going to use your example. I'm also buying a TV. It's a great time to buy a TV, right? So, Javon's buying a television. How big are you getting? Awesome. 50-inch television. It's going to be huge. You know where to watch the football games now. So, what is that? Is that a product, a good, or a service?
product.
Okay, so which law applies for that?
Uniform commercial.
Good. Uniform Commercial Code. Are you going to hang that television yourself? I'm assuming it's a flat screen. Probably. Awesome. Javon's really cool. I'm not. Okay, I'm lazy and I really do a bad job. When I touch things in my house and try to fix them, I always make them worse. So, where are you getting your TV? Best Buy. That's so funny. My other student said that too. So he goes to Best Buy. He's going to buy his TV there. He hangs it himself. He has a product. Okay, he's made a contract. They offered him a TV for, we'll say $400. He gives them the $400. He takes his TV home. He's got his TV. That's awesome for Javon. I can't hang up my TV on the wall. So I asked Best Buy. I pay them an extra $50 to do that for me. Is that a product or a service?
Service.
Service. So which law applies to services?
Common law.
Common law, right? Prior cases, that idea of precedent. But I also got a TV, right? Which is a product, and you told me the Uniform Commercial Code applies. So if I'm getting a TV and they're installing it, which law applies?
Both.
It matters because their contracts are treated differently depending on if it's Uniform Commercial Code or common law. Which is it? Can't be both. It's one or the other. So here's the issue that comes up with that. Most businesses, when they're offering products, they offer services now with them because there's such a focus on making customer have good customer service experience, right? So it's not uncommon that you'd buy a product and there'd be a service involved. There's both in this contract agreement. Would I need them to install the television had I not bought that product? No.
No.
So what's the heart of the contract? What's the most important part of it? Is it the TV or the service part?
The TV.
The TV. So which law do you think applies?
The uniform.
The Uniform Commercial Code. So when you see a combination of things going on, ask yourself, really, can one exist without the other? You know, I'm not gonna have that service done without the product. The product is probably more important than the UCC is going to apply. You know, if it's something like I've asked you to, again, the cleaning service, you're coming to my house, you're doing a cleaning service, and as part of that, I bought some cleaning supplies from you. What do you think's the heart of that contract? Is it the cleaning supplies, which are a product, or the service, which is the cleaning?
Service.
Service. I don't need those supplies without the service, right? So try to figure out which one seems to be more important in the contract. That's usually which one will apply. So now we're going to jump into, now that we have some of the terminology, we know what sources of the law are for contracts, we're going to jump into this part of it, which is agreement. Agreement breaks down into two parts, an offer and acceptance. So we're going to talk about the offer and the acceptance and this idea of the meeting of the minds. To form a contract, we both have to understand what's being agreed to. That seems fair, right? That's this idea of meeting of the minds, right? We both have to know what we're agreeing to. Now, in terms of an offer, this is some type of act, something you do physically, or a statement that you make, offering some type of service that you are going to do or a product you're going to provide. Now, in figuring out if an offer is being made, you're going to look to things like words and actions that indicate you want to make an agreement. I'm trying to have a meetings of the minds with you. I'm trying to offer you this service. I'm trying to offer this product. Okay, so what could indicate that you're trying to make an agreement with someone? As a business, for example, if they're trying to sell Coca-Cola bottles, what's an indicator that they're trying to do that sale with you?
They're offering you.
Yeah, they offer you. Yeah, and it's sitting there in the store, and you can go grab it, right? So just looking to see like what's going on in terms of actions, words. Do they say, hey, you know, are you interested in cleaning my house? Those types of things that sound like you indicate that you want to make an agreement. Now here's some issues that come up with the intent to actually make an agreement. This is some of the stuff you might see on an exam. I'll be asking you, is this a valid offer? Okay, so some examples of things that are not valid offers. I have this guitar here. Do I have any musicians in the room? I have like a this. I don't know what that kinda. Okay. So I'm not artistic, I'm not creative, I'm not a great musician, but my every male figure in my family is my father is like a really good jazz musician back home. And my brother plays in a cool cover band I've told you about. So it's been my lifelong dream since I was a little girl to learn how to play guitar. I can only play Bad to the Bone really badly, okay? It's not my thing. So finally, I'm having my daughter, and my dad's like, listen, I know this is a dream of yours. He buys me a guitar. This is real. I'm telling you a real story. And I'm like, this is great. I'm going to learn how to play guitar so I can play with my little baby girl, and we can have these nice sing-alongs. Doesn't that sound so sweet and nice? What a good mom. In reality, I have zero free time, and I can barely keep myself awake. So that guitar's been sitting like this in my office in my house. And I kid you not, she's been sitting there. I think I tuned it twice while she was still kind of sleeping, and then I haven't touched it. Should I sell that guitar? Probably. Yeah, I should probably get rid of it. So I list it, on what site can I list it?
Offer,
What did you call it?
offer up.
OfferUp? Okay, I don't know that one. Any others?
eBay.
eBay, Craigslist, thank you, OfferUp. We have a few different sites where I could list this, so I do, and I say, you know, $500 or best offer. I know I don't have musicians in here, but does anyone want my guitar? Just play along. Perfect. So how much are you willing to pay, Jeffrey? 400 for that guitar? Anyone else? What do I got? $50. He's going low. Anyone else? This is like Price is Right. You don't have a wrong answer. I get any other bids? $220. Woo, you're going high. Okay, so $500 or best offer. What's the offer that I made? Make an offer?
Yeah. To sell the guitar.
No, Gia, what did I do? Good, so I want to sell the guitar, but I didn't really give an offer. Who gave offers?
We did.
You guys did, right? So what are my offers? I have $400 from Jeffrey. That's an offer. I have $50 from Henry. That's an offer. I have $220 from Riley. That's an offer. So what I did when I posted the guitar was actually invite people to create offers. Now I'm going to accept which of those? Yeah, right? That's high for that guitar. I think my dad paid like $100. Okay, so I am gonna accept Jeffrey's offer. So when you list something like that, and you're saying 500 or best offer, if you're not giving that definite price, I'm asking for other people to make offers to me. And then I can accept one of those, okay? So that's, an invitation to bargain is not going to be an offer. Make sense? The next one that's also not an offer is a price quote. Anyone ever have damage to their vehicle before they needed fixed? Brakes aren't working, things like that. So when you bring it to the mechanic shop, they give you a price quote, right? Was the price that they said they were going to charge you the price they charged you in the end? Not really, Sinyas. It was close though, right?
Yeah.
Close.
But it can be something different at the end.
Yeah, they get in under the hood and they find extra stuff. It happens all the time, right? The idea here is you guys are savvy business people, so you go around, you shop around to a few mechanics when you need your brakes fixed, and they give you estimates, they give you price quotes. They're not guaranteeing they're gonna do the work for $1,200. That's not the offer they're making. They're just giving you an estimate of about how much the work will be. When they actually get into the car and look at it, they'll call you and say, I know I said $1,200, but it looks like it's gonna be $1,500 before they move forward with the work. Okay, that's gonna be the real price. A price quote itself, that's just an estimate. Otherwise, we'd run into issues of our seniors going, well, no, you told me the offer was $1,200 and I accepted that offer. And they're going, well, no, there's all this extra work that needs to get done. So just keep in mind, price quotes, that's an estimate. Now, advertisements are also generally not going to be an offer. And we have lots of marketing where they're saying, hey, Coca-Cola, it's only 99 cents a bottle. And generally, an advertisement alone, they're not going to consider an offer. Because we don't have that bilateral contract where we know both parties are involved. And with unilateral, we're saying, hey, I'm going to give you some money, but you also need to do these specific actions. We don't think advertisements really give rise to that. So an advertisement generally is not an offer.
But how about if you see the price, like a hamburger and a Coke for $5?
So even still, there's not really specific action saying, come to 7-Eleven, buy this Coke, unless it says come to 7-Eleven, buy this Coke today. Generally, we won't call it unilateral. There needs to be some type of specific action with it. So in general, an advertisement usually is not going to be a contract.
They also usually say participating locations only.
They don't give you a ton of information. If you see specific actions with it, then it's a unilateral contract. But in general, assume advertisements are not offers. I saw a couple questions down
Yeah,
here.
just like when it's on sale, they say up to 70% off, but it doesn't mean 70%.
So just to clarify, they should not be lying on the offers, okay? So on an advertisement, I'm sorry, they shouldn't be lying on that. And likewise, if you see a price in a store and it says $2 and you get to the register and it's $5, and there shouldn't be what we call false advertising. That's another issue. Go ahead.
What about when you see an infomercial online, like you buy this product and the first 100 customers will get this product free?
Okay, so would that be a unilateral contract, you think? Well, are they offering you some type of value? Something being exchanged? I'm sorry, it's not on the board anymore. Consideration? They're offering you a discount, right? Free? And what do you have to do to get that? Buy the product and be one of the first 100 callers. So is there specific action too? Yeah, so that could be unilateral. They're offering you something of value in exchange for specific actions. Now, a letter of intent may or may not be an offer. You know the right answer in our class is always it depends. Okay, so you can give a letter of intent saying I intend to work for you, or I intend to give you an offer of employment. It's really not the offer yet or the agreement quite yet. The last piece here, placing an item up for auction, just like that invitation to bargain we did with the guitar, is usually not an offer. It's just a request for offers. So you'll see on the screen here on eBay, like you mentioned earlier, this is a piece of cardboard shaped a bit like an iPhone 5 used. And they're asking for bids. So they're asking for offers, and someone's offered them 14 cents for that piece of cardboard. You're laughing, but that's what was happening on eBay. They were selling iPhones, and you'd show up, and it'd be all wrapped up, and it was turned out on the inside when you opened the box. It was just cardboard in there. So that was why my example is that.
But eBay generally will take action.
Absolutely. So here, that's why they're being really honest. It's a piece of cardboard.
Yeah, I had an issue, and it turned out there were other people saying the same thing in the comments, so I reported it to eBay. This person tried to pay me off by saying, oh, here, and they sent me one from Amazon. You sent me a fake. I was like, thanks for reporting me to eBay.
Good. So that, that's fraud if they're telling you it's an iPhone and it turns out to be cardboard, so you can usually get protected through the company. So here, this was just a funny example for you. They're inviting for bids, they're inviting offers. And again, just like the bargaining earlier, that's when the offers get made. Now here's some of the problems we have with offers. The biggest thing you're gonna run into has to do with definiteness. And this is gonna be different depending on if it's a common law issue or it's a product or good being sold the Uniform Commercial Code. So under common law, if it's something like a service the business is offering, it needs to be very specific, very definite. If it's the Uniform Commercial Code, it's a product, there's a little more flexibility. So they treat businesses with a little more, they give a little more leeway to make sure it's still an enforceable contract. So the terms of the offer should be specific, it should be definite, right? So for an example, I like the Red Sox, I'm from Massachusetts. I have Yankees fans in here? Okay, don't hate on me, okay? So I order a bunch of Red Sox hats to sell at my store, whatever, I order these and I say I'll give you $300 for a box of Red Sox hats. How many hats am I getting?
You don't know.
I don't know. Thanks, Delia. It's a box. It could be a really small, like a shoe box, and I get a couple in there. It could be a large box like this, and there's 100 in there. Is that definite and specific? No. So that's what I mean by definiteness. You can't be vague like that unless it's really a merchant, a business owner, like an Amazon who regularly sells these products. Then the UCC applies, and there's more flexibility. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. I want to say things like $300 for 20 Red Sox hats. So I'm being a little more clear. Now, if it is that the Uniform Commercial Code applies, so in my Red Sox hat example, imagine I'm a baseball store and I sell hats regularly. Which law would apply? The UCC or the common law? Good, Riley, the UCC. If it's products, UCC. So in my Red Sox hat example, UCC again is generally more liberal. You don't have to be as specific. So for example, price. So if I just said send me 20 hats and I didn't tell them how much I wanted to pay per hat, they'll just look at the market value of that hat. So they'll say, it's going to be around $30. Enforce the contract just because that price was missing. The other piece of that are what we call output and requirement provisions. I know that sounds really fancy. Here's what it is. An output contract obligates a seller to sell all of their output. So for instance, I own a farm. What should I sell on my farm?
Corn.
That came up last class too. I'm going to sell corn, right? So Safeway decides they need corn to sell to you guys, right? So they get that corn from me. Do we know how much corn I'm going to get each year out of my, yard of corn? How many ears of corn I will make? No. But they're saying, we will buy all of it. However much corn you're able to, grow this year, Safeway's going to buy all of it. That's what we call an output contract. Okay? Whereas under a requirements contract, it says the buyer is obligated to have all of their goods from you. So I'm going to give you examples of these to make them make more sense. Under the requirements contract, it obligates the buyer to only buy from one distributor. So for example, you own a clothing store, right? A really cool clothing store, and you agree I will only buy the material from G Street Fabrics in Rockville. Does that benefit G Street Fabrics?
Yeah.
How does it benefit them? Yeah, they get your business, which is a larger amount of business. They don't have to compete with any of the other fabric stores. So do you think they might give you a discount? Yeah. So that happens a lot in business. You're agreeing, this is my exclusive supplier. That way we can agree to a lower cost point because they know that you're only buying from them. That's a requirements contract. Do we know how much material you're going to buy? No, but we'll still enforce it because under the UCC, you don't have to be as specific. It's a requirement contract. You're just saying all of it will come from there. Likewise, the output contract obligates a seller to sell all of their output. So for example, Kim Kardashian decides she wants to make a really cool clothing line and she sells it exclusively to Sears. Then Sears gets to say, we are the only ones who offer this. Could that be an advantage for Sears? Yeah, so that happens often too. We don't know how many she'll make, but she's saying I'll only sell it in your store. That happened when the iPhone came out. I told you I was at AT&T. AT&T was the exclusive provider. It was the only place you could get the iPhone that Apple produced when it first came out for a couple of years. That's an example of an output contract. It didn't matter how many they produced, AT&T was saying, we'll be the ones to get them from you, and that was a good competitive advantage for both businesses. Jonah?
In terms of like, when you were saying you agree to only buy from, say, G Street, if your company gets big and G Street can't keep up with the demand, now, is there a way to amend the contract saying whatever you can't provide, we can get from somewhere else, or?
So that's a really good point because that happens. So for example, Chipotle is the one that comes to mind right away. They try to do really like, we're doing really non-GMO, whatever else with their meats, and they run out of them a lot from the suppliers because they're smaller suppliers. So you go in and you want your barbacoa and you can't get it. So that's a problem when you choose to use someone that's maybe a little smaller business to help them. As you scale up in your business size and they can't really meet the requirements you need, you'll run into an issue. So you can always modify your agreement. As long as it meets all the requirements, it's legal, it's okay for you to agree and have a meeting of the minds to do something else. A good idea from the beginning, like Jonah said, this is where you want to be kind of aware of things. Put all the terms into your contract. In the beginning, you should have some type of clause that says, if you cannot meet our demand, then we may use other suppliers, okay, to protect yourself. And those are the kinds of things where sometimes a lawyer can be helpful because they might catch that when you don't. So for example, a lot of construction contracts, do you think most construction gets done on time? So I talked about my sister's business a number of times. You know, they had a contract with a construction company to make sure all this work was done by a specific date. Each day the business doesn't get to open, they lose thousands of dollars. So often you'll put a specific term in the contract saying, you know, each day that you are delayed in the work, you're gonna have to pay $2,500 or $25,000, whatever you think the value of that day of lost business might be. So those are the kinds of terms you want to put in ahead of time and are working on any contingency, any issues that might arise. And again, that's where attorneys can be helpful because they've seen them before. They're kind of ready for it. I have an example for you. Who's seen The Sopranos? Awesome. So The Sopranos, it's about this like mafia guy going to therapy. Is that a fair? So there's actually a case from where The Sopranos originated from, this show, if you're not familiar with it. David Chase is this writer-producer of what eventually became The Sopranos. And he had shows like The Rockford Files, and he became really interested in making this like mafia show about a mob boss in therapy. And so he eventually develops this into The Sopranos, but there's this issue here of the guy he was working with along the way in developing this TV show series. So Robert Baer is a prosecutor. He puts away the bad guys in New Jersey. And he wanted to write for television too. So he meets with Chase and he pitches this idea concerning a film or a TV series about the New Jersey mafia specifically. And he doesn't realize that Chase already has this idea for the mob boss in therapy. So later that year, Chase actually visits New Jersey. And with Baer's help, he visits the local detectives, the prosecutors, he even talks to some criminals, and provides Chase with material and personal stories about organized crime to help inform The Sopranos TV show. Eventually, The Sopranos becomes a really big hit. It is a big hit TV show. If you haven't seen it, I think there was 8 seasons on HBO. And so Baer sues, right? He's like, I want some of that money. That was my idea. He's really upset. And he claims Chase said twice on the phone that he would basically pay him, he'd take care of him for helping him out. Okay, how much money does that mean that Baer gets?
We don't know.
Yeah, no specific.
Okay, so under the UCC, what applies for the UCC? What is this the UCC here? Why is this not the UCC? It's not products being sold by a merchant here, right? What is it? It's services, yeah. So under the UCC, we could be pretty flexible. We don't know what the rate is. What would they do? How much money would they charge? I don't know the cost of the hat. We didn't say in the contract. What would they charge? How much does a hat usually cost? If I go to the store and buy Henry, Jeffrey, someone wearing a hat, how much would I have to pay? $30, perfect, the market value. So they're gonna look at what's the market value. Okay, that's what the UCC would do. Now the UCC doesn't apply here, so what's missing? When they say take care of, what's the issue with this offer and this contract? It's not specific, it's not definite. So this is an illustration of definiteness for you. Okay, the price term is an essential part of the contract if it doesn't fall under the UCC. Here, we don't know what take care of means. You know, Bear's idea of what take care of means could be thousands of dollars. Whereas Chase could think like, oh, I'm gonna take you out to dinner, right? So you need to have really specific pricing when we talk about contracts that are not about the sale of goods. Termination of offers. So when offers end, there's a plea by revoking it. You know, Jeffrey, you offered me $400 for my guitar. Okay, before I accept that, Sinya's like, whispers to him, Jeffrey, you know, that guitar, I think that's only worth like $50. You think he wants to revoke his offer?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't even accepted it yet. He can just go ahead and revoke it. Okay, it's effective when the offeree receives it. Okay, so he says, you know what, Professor Weiser, never mind. I don't really want to pay $400 for that guitar. I'm gonna say, okay, that's fine. You don't have an agreement then, he made an offer. I no longer have the opportunity to accept it, that's okay. Now in some scenarios, again here we see the UCC coming into mind when there's products being sold by a merchant. You can't always just cancel your offer because you want to. So first of all, an option contract. Okay, that's a contract, any type of contract where there's some type of value, consideration being made, being exchanged to keep the offer open for a certain amount of time. So for example, you go to buy a house and you say, I will put down $5,000, I intend to buy this house, please take it off the market and don't sell it to anybody else. Now I've given them money basically to keep my offer open. That's the idea of an option contract. If you're giving value, you're paying for that offer to stay open, it has to stay open. A firm offer is different. Here we have the UCC, so we have a merchant selling goods, okay, and they say, I will keep this offer open for a period of 10 days. Okay, for 10 days, you can get a 10% discount on hats. Okay, they can't just all of a sudden come through and decide they're not going to offer that discount again. So if a merchant does this under the UCC, they say there's going to be a certain period of time. Was there anything of value being exchanged to keep that 10% discount for 10 days? No, not like an option contract. A firm offer, simply because it's a business who's selling products and they say they're going to keep it open for a matter of time, we want to make sure they uphold that. It wouldn't be fair. Now, the big difference here is that an option contract, there has to be something of value. A firm offer, you don't have to be paying someone basically to hold the offer open. Now, you can also terminate an offer by rejection, and I want to talk about this because you guys are going to get awesome job offers, right? You're going to get your dream job, and that's great. They're going to offer you a bunch of money to come work for them, right? Should you negotiate that offer? Yeah, so Professor, I've told you this before. You're going to go, Professor Weiser told me to negotiate. So I'm going to offer Catherine $100,000 for your dream job when you get out of school. Sound good?
Yeah.
You're going to negotiate, Catherine. So you say no. What do you ask for instead? Yeah, what do you want? I offered 100. What would make you happy, Catherine? 145. Ooh, she's going big. So she wants $145,000. Okay. Milton, $100,000, same job. You okay with that?
Yeah.
You are? Great. So Milton says okay. Catherine comes back. Sorry, you know what? I'll do it for $100,000. Can she still take that job? No, I just gave it to Milton, right? So here's the issue you run into. I encourage you to negotiate. But what happened when I made an offer to Catherine? What was my offer? $100,000 dream job, right? What did Catherine do? Did she accept that? So what did she do? She counteroffered. Good. What was her offer? 145. So what happened was I made an offer. She rejected it by negotiating. She said no, but I will do the work for $145,000. Now she's made me an offer. Did I accept? No. I made a new offer to someone else. I gave Milton the job. So with negotiating, you want to be careful. When you're making counteroffers, you're technically rejecting that offer, and it's not going to be there for you then. Still, it's no longer valid. They could choose to offer it to someone else. Now, in real life, do you think that happens a lot?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because here's the deal. I chose Catherine. Sorry, Milton. Catherine was super valuable to me. I spent a lot of time, money, and as a business owner, I've decided she's the right fit. So I expect there's gonna be some negotiating. Most businesses, there is. They have a range, they expect, it's kind of standard business conduct, there'll be some negotiating. So I offered her 100, I figured I'd probably have to go up a little bit. That's normal, it's kind of part of the hiring process, I expect it. I want Catherine, and I already spent my time and money. She has a lot of bargaining power when we're at the point that we're arguing about salary. I'm not gonna all of a sudden just drop her over like $10,000. Likewise, she might not wanna turn down a job over $5,000, which if you break it down, isn't a ton of money, per month on a weekly basis when you remove the taxes. You wanna be careful, don't risk losing your dream job because you're arguing with someone over the $5,000, right? So, probably, I'm not gonna give her $145,000. I'll say I can't do that. I can offer you 110. Will that work for you? Does that work for you, Catherine? She'll say yes. Okay, so usually that's what'll happen. There's expected to be this back and forth, but understand that could happen. They could say like, screw you, Catherine, I'm gonna give Milton the job instead. That's why I advise you maybe not to go back and forth and start looking greedy, and not to use reasons like, I have a lot of student loans. Okay, instead focus on things like, I'm really valuable, I think I'm a good fit here. I've been looking around at some other places, I'd prefer to work for you. Can you go any higher on the salary? If they say no, they say no. Offers can also expire. So when an offer specifies a time limit for acceptance, that period's binding. If I say, I have an offer to sell the guitar for the next 10 days for $400 and you don't take me up on it, it's not gonna be there anymore after that 10-day period. If there's no time limit, we'll usually say some type of reasonable amount of time. We'll look to precedent to figure that out. Offers can also be terminated by destruction, okay? Under operation of law. Do you want to buy this house? So you make an offer on this beautiful house by the shore and then a hurricane comes through. Do you still want to buy it?
No.
No, so they're not going to enforce this contract agreement. Now, if you already had a contract, now we have a different issue. Okay, but if you're still in progress of just trying to have an agreement being made, an offer, and no one's accepted yet, and all of a sudden what you're making an agreement about gets destructed, offer is no longer on the table. Likewise, if someone dies or there's a mental incapacity after you've started to make this offer, the offer will no longer be valid. However, if it's turned into a contract again, that's another story. Now, how do you accept an offer? What do you think usually, how do we accept an offer? What indicates we want to accept an offer? Yeah, handshake. Good job, Henry, on the screen. How else could you accept an offer? If it's in writing, what do you do?
Sign.
Yeah, signature could indicate it, right? So any type of form of indication that you want to accept that offer. Okay, you have to just say or do something that shows you accept it. Pretty easy, right? Now here's something to be aware of. Again, this is going to be different for common law versus the Uniform Commercial Code. So under the common law, you want to write this down. It'll probably show up on the exam. It has to do with this idea of a mirror. Does this look like a mirror to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So mirror on the wall kind of thing. So the mirror image rule. Because under common law, an offer needs to be really specific and definite, the acceptance needs to be the exact same as the offer that was made. If I offer you something you have to accept in the exact same form, it needs to be exactly the same terms. So here's what can't happen. I can't go, Catherine, come work for me, I'll pay you $100,000 a year. And Catherine says, yes, I will come work for you for $105,000 a year. She hasn't accepted, right? If she changes any of the terms under the mirror image rule, we have an issue. You need to accept the exact offer that was made. Otherwise, what are you really doing? Rejecting and proposing a new offer. Okay, so mirror image rule, you need to accept the offer exactly as it is. Now under the UCC, that is different. Okay, so under the Uniform Commercial Code, which again applies to what?
Goods.
Sale of goods. Under that, there's some differences. Basically, there's 3 exceptions. And instead of me telling you them, because I've been talking a while now, I want to wake you up. So I am going to have a really fun way to show you these 3 exceptions. Okay, under the Uniform Commercial Code, we have businesses, they negotiate all the time. It's a little more flexible. The offer does not have to match the acceptance. You may change the terms in 3 circumstances. There's a nice visual here that shows you that. But I'm actually going to show you a fun song. I'm going to sing it for you. I'm just kidding. I told you I'm not musical, so I'm going to show you this little video here.
This form is your form, that form is my form. They show a contract for us to perform. You sent an order, I sent an invoice. What terms are binding on you and me? I am a merchant, I am a seller. You're not a merchant, just a regular fella. And my invoice is an acceptance, but additional terms aren't binding on you and me. If you're a merchant, our forms do battle. It isn't merely idle prattle. We have a contract, and the invoice terms are added in, unless it's an exception, and there are three. This form is your form, that form is my form. They show a contract for us to perform. You sent an order, I sent an invoice. What terms are binding on you and me? Between merchants, new terms are binding, unless you find them quite surprising. If unexpected, then material alteration you'll claim, and the new terms aren't binding on you and me. Perhaps your offer expressly stated contract terms could not be annotated, or perhaps you previously objected to the invoice terms, so you raised your objection unreasonably. This form is your form, that form is my form. They show a contract for us to perform. You sent an order, I sent an invoice. What terms are binding on you and me?
You guys are gonna hate me later when that's playing in your head, but here's the thing. So before you take the bar exam and get to become an attorney, that's really when you learn the law. You take these kind of, they call them bar these classes, and they have a bunch of professors that videotape themselves telling you all about this stuff, and you kind of fill in outlines with notes watching those videos. And that's when you get to become an attorney, you go take the bar. The property law subject part of that, there was this like really sexy woman who did the videos, and she would sing all of the law. And I thought it was the most annoying thing. Obviously my husband liked it. And I'm like, oh, and property was not, that was probably my worst subject when I was in law school. It was Friday mornings, I was tired from being out partying, and I thought it was really boring. Okay, so property law on the bar exam was my best topic, because as annoying as I thought that woman was, I remembered her singing those dumb songs when I was taking the exam, and it helped me remember. So I hope that helps you remember. In general, the offer should match what's being accepted, right? You should be accepting exactly the terms that are being named under the common law. However, when the Uniform Commercial Code applies, there's a few exceptions. The big one, any new terms, as long as they're not material, they'll say it's still a valid contract. So for example, I make a contract to buy 10 computers. From Montgomery College, I'm gonna buy 10 computers from Apple. And Apple says, sure, we agree on the pricing. And then they send me back and they say, you know what? We're gonna send the computers, but I know you wanted them Tuesday, we're gonna send them Wednesday. Does that seem like a material, a large change? No. Probably not a big deal, unless like it was gonna be like I'm gonna lose thousands of dollars over it. Probably not material. They'll look to precedent to figure that out. So again, as long as the new term's not a big change, it's not what we call material, they'll include it when the UCC is at play. If the offer you make says you can't make any changes to this, then you can't make any changes, even if they're not big ones. Or if somebody said, I'm not okay with that, these need to be here on Tuesday, you can't change that. And then you say, oh, they're coming Wednesday, well, that's obvious now, it's a big change to me, right? So those are really the three exceptions. It shouldn't be a really big change, it shouldn't be material. Okay, if I say no changes, can't make any changes. Or lastly, if it's something where I've previously said this is a problem for me in our communications, you can't just try to slip it in and be like, that's not a big deal, it's minor. Make it work. Now the Uniform Commercial Code only applies when we have a business selling goods to another business. So keep in mind, when I sold my guitar to Jeffrey, was that Uniform Commercial Code? So I'm not a business, I'm not someone who usually sells guitars. It would need to be like a music store. And now, again, the music store is selling to Jeffrey. Does the Uniform Commercial Code apply?
No.
No, because who does the other party need to be? Another business. Okay, so if it's a music store, and they have all kinds of instruments, and they're buying guitars from a guitar supplier, and now we have Uniform Commercial Code. So a few differences, again, you're going to see throughout the contract law depending on what you're agreeing to. Now this also matters, the communication of the acceptance, and how you communicate that you want to accept the offer matters. So in general, if they ask you to do it in a certain way, you have to do it in that certain way. If I say, if you want to buy my guitar, you need to show up at my doorstep, by Friday at noon. You need to show up at my doorstep at Friday at noon. You can't just shoot me a message and say, I want it. You send me an email, I'm taking it, or send me a check in the mail. I've asked you very specifically to come in person to my home by a certain time. If I don't say how you need to accept it, any reasonable way will do, okay? Sending me a check, whatever it might be. This is the big issue when we talk about businesses and when you accept. Is the United States Postal Service known for being quick in delivering mail? Not usually. Sorry to hate on them. In the business field, you'll also normally hear that called snail mail. Anyone ever heard that term before? Snail mail, because it's like really slow to get to you. So that's where this idea of the mailbox rule came into play. An acceptance, when you want to accept an offer, it's generally effective mail out. If you're sending out mail, the second you send it, they stamp it sent on November 15th. Okay, that's the day that it was accepted, even though the business didn't receive it yet, right? Because it's not fair when snail mail happens, it could take 5 days, it could take 7 days, it could take 10 days for it to get there. You could run into some issues. So it's accepted the day it goes out the door. So you're going to see a scenario like this on the exam. And it's going to confuse you because there's a bunch of dates. So let me show it to you now. July 10th, Supplier Incorporated sent ABC Restaurant a letter offering to sell $10,000 in restaurant supplies. July 15th, ABC Restaurant mails a letter to Supplier Inc. accepting the offer. Supplier Inc. then receives the acceptance letter on July 20th. July 17th, they sent a letter revoking the offer. ABC Restaurant received this letter on July 21st. According to the mailbox rule, when was a contract made between these two businesses?
July 15th.
July 15th. Good job, Delia. None of this other stuff matters. All that matters is what? The date they mailed it out. The date it was sent. Doesn't matter when they received it. Okay, what matters is the date it was sent, and it was sent on July 15th. So when you see something like this on the exam, you want to look for which date. Yeah, good job, Jeff. On the sent date. The sent date. It's effective right when it's sent. Okay? Whereas a rejection is going to be effective when it's received. Okay, did they receive the rejection before it was accepted? No. Okay, so they accepted it. It was accepted on July 15th. They did not receive the revocation letter until July 21st, which is after the 15th. So all that matters is the day it was sent under the mailbox rule.
In order to revocation be valid, it has to be before July 15th.
It would have to be received before July 15th. Yes. So this is why this is so important. Sorry, I backtrack here. In business, a lot of times, you do these things called proposals, and they need to get in by a certain day. So, for example, our federal government often will say, "Hey, they'll ask for offers." It's called a request for proposal. They're asking businesses to give them offers to say, "Hire us to work for you." So, for example, they need a cleaning service for one of the federal agencies. They'll put out a request for proposals and say, "Cleaning services compete for our business. Tell us what you're going to charge, tell us you're the best quality provider, and then we'll choose which one to do." So they ask you to compete for the business. So they do a request for proposals, and then they say, "Give me that proposal that says you're the best cleaning service at the lowest price and why you're the right person for me to hire, and do it by November 15th. And they're very specific. You need to send it electronically, you need to send 5 printed copies as well, and it needs to be received by noon on Friday. Now, as a business owner, you send it out in the mail, and it doesn't get there by noon on Friday. Because snail mail, something happens, they lose your mail. Does that seem fair to you? No. But they've asked for a very specific medium for it to get to you, right? They want it in writing, they want 5 copies, they want it electronically, they want it by noon. So businesses, do you think they just mail this stuff out? Multi-million-dollar contract that they just mail the proposal out and hope snail mail will get it to them on time? No, what do you think they do? Good job, Henry. They send someone. And not only do they send one person, if we're talking a multi-million-dollar contract, and they send G, and G's flight gets delayed, well, that stinks. So they're also going to send Maddie. Okay, they'll often send 2 people, and they'll do it early to make sure that proposal is there in the right format on time. If you miss that window, you get there at 12:02. Is your proposal considered? No, you get disqualified automatically. Doesn't that suck? So that actually happened once. My friend Brian Hildebrandt also teaches this class here. That happened. They had this big multi-million-dollar contract Health and Human Services was asking for. Businesses were submitting proposals. There was a business in Texas. They mailed something. It literally got lost in the mail. The U.S. Post Office had like their Postmaster General write a letter saying this was our fault, blah, 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 blah. Point is they missed the deadline. And they asked them for a really specific medium. This was the argument that they used. Well, we accepted the second it was sent out to you. It's not our fault that the mail lost it, right? Do you think they won? Why not? The government asked for what? Specific date, specific time, specific medium. And remember, if they're asking for a specific medium, you have to do what they're asking for. This was a good argument, but it didn't work on that specific example. But we're going to talk about the Carlo case in our next class to illustrate some of these things. What questions do I have so far on contracts? That was a lot of information. I want to ask you guys again, because we talked about this last class, why are we spending so much time on contracts? What's the value? Why does it matter? You see them every day, so who can give me some examples of where you see contracts in your everyday life, even if you're not involved in business? Go ahead, Henry.
Your cell phone.
Cell phone bill, any bills you're getting, anything else? Go ahead, Delia.
When you apply for a credit card.
Yeah, you apply for a credit card, you're creating a contract with a credit card company. What else?
Buy food.
One more time, Sebastian.
Buy like food.
And when you're buying food, you go out to buy food or anything, any purchases from a business, any others? One more time? Terms and agreements, so when you see something like on iTunes, updating the software and click OK. So I'm going to stop there. Remember, you have your quiz due on Tuesday before class. We'll focus on consideration, the value being exchanged. Again, you want to keep in mind the requirements of a contract. You should know the different sources of a contract, some of the words involved, and some of the exceptions we discussed today. We'll jump into consideration next class. Enjoy your weekend.